Good afternoon. Agendas for conferences like this are assembled well ahead of time, and I was phoned about 6 months ago and given this title. And I thought, that's fine, Ataxia UK will know all about orphan drugs by then. But the reality is that we don't, because we're an organisation that is just embarking on the discovery of what orphan drugs are all about. So I wrestled with the title and I went to see an experienced colleague, and he said, don't worry about the title, I always ignore the title. But my problem was that I didn't know what I didn't know. And I felt the more honest thing to do was to show you what I don't know and to show you where Ataxia is up to in the world of orphan drugs. Do I believe that that a patient is the ultimate beneficiary or the forgotten endpoint? Well, I think from my point of view at the moment, the jury's out. But you will see some of the thinking that we've engaged in. First of all, I'm here as Chief Executive of Ataxia UK, but I think I've also been invited because I'm General Secretary of euro-Ataxia. Euro-Ataxia is a federation of 18 country associations covering 13 countries. Some of the organisations are very, very small patient organisations. Some are small but punch above their weight. Some don't deal with all the ataxias. Some are part of wider neurological umbrella groups. Some are simply support groups. Others aspire to raise funds for research. None are as fortunate in the resources that they have as we are at Ataxia UK, for which we are very grateful. We have an office, we have 12 paid staff. Lots of these organisations that you see here don't have any paid staff. However, the uniting thing is that all of these organisations are governed by the patients themselves, their families and friends, all of whom are hoping desperately that a treatment, still better a cure, for this wretched condition will be forthcoming soon. I'd like you to hear from somebody who has ataxia. Can you play the vid, please?
I've worked here for 26 years and my diagnosis was confirmed 5 years ago. Not knowing what ataxia was didn't help. You were presented with, you have this, there is no cure, but it shouldn't impede you too much.
We know that there are over 50 different types of inherited ataxia, and then there's other forms of ataxia caused by brain injury or by alcohol or by other external causes.
Over the years, it's finding that you can't do what you used to be able to do. So going downstairs used to be very easy, now it's very difficult.
For the majority of ataxias, there are no treatments, but there are many different research avenues being explored. Ataxia UK is currently funding about 20 different projects. We're investing in stem cell research, we're investing in research trying to find diagnosis, but we are quite away from a cure, unfortunately.
Often people may have difficulties with maintaining their work role, so we can look at reasonable adjustments within the workplace. And fatigue is something that people find impacts their daily routine, so we can help them manage their fatigue more effectively.
On work, the impact has been, it curtails the number of hours I spend here, which is probably no bad thing. I tend not to go and visit clients any longer because it takes far too long for me to get there and to recover from the meeting. Ataxia is not the end of life as you know it. It is just a different challenge.
Nigel doesn't have a very
I've worked
aggressive
here for
form of
26
ataxia.
years, and my
There are
diagnosis
numerous
was
different
confirmed
sorts
5 years
of
ago.
ataxia. Can I have my slide back? Yes. There are numerous different sorts of ataxia. The best known is Friedreich's ataxia, which tends to strike young people during puberty. What you see with them is a general clumsiness.
I've worked
Their
here
parents may be
for
telling them off rather
26
regularly
years,
for dropping
and
stuff.
my
Then their parents may suggest that they've been drinking at 13 or 14 because they have a wobbly gait and look rather drunk. But sooner or later, they will be off in front of a neurologist,
takes far too long
and
for
eventually
me to
they
get
will
there.
have a diagnosis. If you've got the misfortune to have a child with ataxia, then what you will become aware of is that by the age of 20, most likely they will be in a wheelchair. And with Friedreich's ataxia, the average life expectancy is typically 35. We have many families that this has happened to, including one family with 6 children, where 3 have a diagnosis, and another with 4 children, where 3 have a diagnosis. Friedreich's is carried by recessive genes. Scars, spinocerebellar ataxias, on the other hand, are carried by a dominant gene and can become symptomatic at any age of life, but more usually in older people. If it's in your family, you'd be likely to know it. A grandparent or uncles or aunts, cousins are likely to be affected already. Here you can see from amongst the Ataxia UK membership the range of ataxias that we've got. FA is by far the most prevalent, but maybe overrepresented. Perhaps these people got their diagnosis, some of them, before there were any other thoughts of other ataxias existing. Thus, the scars are likely to be underrepresented. Genetic testing is not yet freely available, and there may be many amongst the 68% who have ataxia of an unknown cause. Additionally, new ones are being discovered at a dramatic rate. When I wrote this presentation initially, I wrote 32 scars. I looked up Orphan this morning, and there's 36 now. So we have to keep up to date. There are only treatments for 2 or 3. For example, gluten-ataxin can be arrested by a simple change in diet. But for the rest, there's no cure, not even any treatment to delay the degeneration. So what are the dilemmas for patient groups? I think probably many of the dilemmas that we have are shared by other patient groups. We have limited resources, so what do we do with them? We don't get any state funding. Do we support people while they're living, or do we put in money for research tomorrow? We have lots of conditions, you saw from the slide. So which condition do we invest money in? Is it viable for us to be committing research monies to conditions where there are only 2 or 3 patients who are in membership of our society? What will the rest of the donors say if we're spending their money on an ultra-rare condition? This is a problem for our association. And then the capacity to engage in this sort of meeting, in the meetings that will bring us up to speed, do we have the ability to be able to commit the resources to even educate ourselves as to the issues that we're dealing with? The way that Ataxia UK resolves this is to try and do everything with 12 staff. So we work hard at trying to improve treatment and care. People have a great deal of trouble with diagnosis. They have a great deal of trouble with ongoing care, dealing with the consequences of their ataxia. We've assembled medical guidelines. These get provided to people's GPs and neurologists. We have funded ataxia centres within the National Health Service with pump priming money for specialist nurses. And we lobby in order to make sure that treatment and care is the best that it can be. We provide our own services to people with and affected by ataxia. We have a helpline, an advocacy project, and support groups are really fundamental to people's ability to be able to regain their confidence. Meeting with other people and talking through the challenges, other people who have ataxia, and talking through the challenges is really important and vital to people. And we offer that opportunity also at our members' conferences. We need to raise awareness of ataxia. I won't embarrass you by asking you to raise your hands who's ever heard of genetic ataxias before. Thank you very much for raising your hand saying that you did. We did some market research amongst the general public in the UK, and we found that only 7% of the general public within the UK had ever heard of ataxia. Only 7%. Maybe that's quite good, but it's certainly not sufficient for our members. We have a publication called Ataxia, What's That? And really, every time I say my job is working in ataxia, I get a what's that back again. Furthermore, we have situations because of public ignorance where people are accused of being drunk. So we've had people at supermarket checkouts turned away from buying whiskey. You can't have that whiskey, you're already drunk. We had a trustee trying to get into the United States in a wheelchair to go to an ataxia conference. You can't come in our country, you're drunk. So this is a substantial challenge to people, and it is one of their requests that we should make the condition more known about so that they don't feel that their condition is casting a slur upon them by other people's perspectives. We also then, on top of all of this, research towards treatments and cure. I'd like to say it was 7 million plus within the last 6 years, but actually it was a slip of the finger, and it's 6 million plus in the last 6 years, which I think actually for a small patient group where we only believe that we have 10,000 people affected by ataxia in the UK is a phenomenal achievement. And we also support our scientists and obtain patients for research trials, and also bring the scientists together on a regular basis. And that's not us that does that, but also other patient groups across the world, so that we foster the collaboration between the scientists. So our research program is usually between 550,000 and 950,000 euros per year. I say that usually, you'll see in a minute it's taken a nosedive recently. We invest our money in all of the progressive ataxias where possible, except for ataxia telangiectasia, which has its own society in the UK. We do a wide range of research. We have to balance things because our research program is heavily oversubscribed. We have to, as it were, look for the right horse to jump on and know when to jump off if the horse goes lame, or persist with the research if we think it might be getting somewhere. From time to time, we're proactive in following up promising lines of research. In Friedreich's ataxia, the hot prospects are HDAC inhibitors and gene silencing. But we've also done studies of the natural histories of a number of the conditions, and we've prioritised investing in models to enable high throughput screening of drug candidates. But we can't neglect the need to increase the ability to accurately diagnose what type of ataxia a patient has, and this means investing in basic research also. So I'm showing you this slide not only to celebrate the 6 million we've been able to commit, but to show that patient organisations are at the mercy of the economic climate. I'm not proud of this figure at the bottom there for last year. Unfortunately, we didn't receive any legacies, so maybe that is good because we didn't have so many people who died. But equally, what it means is that we haven't got the money to invest. We only get given money by people who have some connection with the condition. We have a small pond to fish in for our fundraising. And so we are grateful to what our donors have done. But actually, times are hard at the moment. What this has done, though, is to encourage us all to work together across Europe and indeed across the world as patient groups. All the 5 projects we funded last year were funded in collaboration with euro-Ataxia partners, the patient groups from the US and Australia. And with these partners, we've funded £3 million worth of research. So good modelling in collaboration across our sector. These organisations also have their own research projects. So together we must be investing vast amounts of money, particularly FARA and NAF in the US. The collaboration that we foster also extends to the scientists. And so we've been fortunate to have amongst the scientists 2 EU-funded projects, Euroscar, which involve 24 different labs, and EFACT into FA, which has involved 14 labs, and Repligen. The coming together of these scientists has been very much fostered by the patient groups and their willingness and desire to have conferences at which scientists are represented. Here's the FA treatment pipeline, which has been assembled by FARA. I don't mean that they've done all the funding, I mean they put the slide together. And you can see here, with some difficulty, but if you go on the net later, you'll see more clearly that there are 7 clinical trials coming on in 6 areas. So we're focusing within FA on 6 different areas. And in the last 10 years, we have changed the landscape from one that had no clinical trials to one that involves these 7 trials currently, with 2 more to begin in the next 2 months. The trials aren't competing with one another, they're aimed at different mechanisms of damage and therapeutic intervention. But you will see, I hope, even from the back, that there's only one that's got to phase 3. And I was interested that people were talking about this sort of situation this morning. Idebenone. It has a license in Canada, but not in Europe. And that is of great frustration to everybody in the ataxia community with FA. So, what do we need to do to get to grips with orphan drugs? What are the issues for the patient groups? Well, of course, you only begin to do this once you have the drugs going through the pipeline. And I think the first thing is our own naivety of not understanding the environment and climate in which we are about to enter. I have learnt so much, even just being here for a few hours, that I didn't know before. So it's the naivety, it's the complexity. How do we get to grips with the issues of intellectual property? Are the contracts that we're issuing for our research the right contracts? Do they safeguard our interests? Do we want our interests safeguarded? Or do we just want to give them away to somebody who will make a profit out of them quickly because that will bring something to market? All of these things are things that we're going to have to get to grips with. The culture of farmers. I know nothing about the culture of farmers. If somebody had said to me, farmers 4 years ago, I would have said, that's the people who go out and plough the fields and scatter. I have come into this as a novice in just the same way as my organisation is in many ways coming into this as a novice, as novices. One of the things that obviously one does believe, and it may not be true, is that there is a very different culture between pharmaceuticals and the voluntary sector, the patient organisations. I have to say that I have heard a great deal of attention paid to the patient as endpoint from this platform. If this culture is the culture that runs across your sector, then actually many of the patient groups don't have too much to be worried about. But I don't know if that's true yet, because I'm still naive and learning. I do know that one of the things that we need to do is to maintain boundaries and independence. We need to be able to say to our stakeholders that we are our own people and haven't been bought out by the pharmaceuticals, because they have particular perspectives of what pharmaceuticals are all about. And certainly people with ataxia are very worried about being exploited by the prices of drugs when they eventually come to market, especially if they're not going to be able to obtain them from our National Health Service. We're also, I think, of a belief, and I'm beginning to know that it's not true, that all pharmaceutical companies are enormous. And that also can lead to a misperception that actually you've got loads of money and you're just waiting to give it all away. And I'm sure that isn't true. I'm sure that isn't true. So what about the potential of patient groups? Well, actually, I think that people have said many things much more expertly from this platform already today than I can say. But let me tell you how I see it. I believe that patient groups have many meaningful things to say at every stage of the research and drug development process. True patient engagement needs to happen early in the process so that you can start to understand the patient and the patient groups can start to understand you and gain some trust. What can we bring to the table? We can bring links with the research community, highly developed links with the research community and with the clinical research community too. Many of our researchers know patients individually. And that's not just the clinicians, that's also the scientific researchers. And that means that they are incredibly committed to what they do and will be incredibly committed to the development of drugs and treatments as they begin to come through. Patients have insights into the condition, insights that sometimes aren't easily available. We have already assembled databases of patients who want to go into trials, and we can assist with the construction of patient registries. We can also bring influence to bear. Coincidentally, as Chief Executive of Ataxia UK, I'm also Vice Chair of the Neurological Alliance in England. The Neurological Alliance is the umbrella group covering all neurological conditions in the UK. That has, from time to time, allowed me individual access to government ministers. And before I talk about the particular policy issue that I'm coming to talk about, I always do my little patter of, and my day job is, I'm from Ataxia UK, and Ataxia is. And that is beginning to forge relationships and get people to understand about ataxia within government and within senior policymakers. So we have influence that can be brought to bear from within our structures. And all of this feeds into the issue of patient power and the fact that we have a lot of people out there, not just the patients themselves, but other people who are rooting for us. And that can be brought to the table in collaboration with you. So what's happening so far? Well, collaborating already are all of these organisations. Not only are they engaging in drug development, but certainly our experience at euro-Ataxia is that the ones that are most committed to patient partnership show up at our euro-Ataxia meetings, want to talk to patients, and even sponsor the conferences which we can't afford to hold. And that is very useful. However, we don't just see you as a cash cow, and nor do we simply want the drug that you're going to produce at the end. We want to be full partners with you during the processes of developing that drug. We want to understand and learn from you because you are the people who know much more about the regulatory environment and the hurdles that are going to be that need to be got through. And we want to understand which buttons to press and where to bring pressure to bear. Ultimately, the achievement of treatment goals in rare diseases will only be achieved through the partnerships between the clinical and scientific researchers, the patient groups, and the pharmaceuticals. One of the other things I should say that you could also do is if you don't have a commercial interest in a particular area, if you are able to provide a member of staff to a patient group to give advice where there is no conflict of interest because you're not intending to get involved in that area, then that can be a really useful source of unbiased advice for that patient group. And indeed, we have people sitting on our scientific advisory committee who work for pharmaceuticals with no interest in ataxia and are able to give up their time. So, are we the ultimate beneficiaries of whatever is produced as orphan drugs? Well, of course, as patients, yes, we are the ultimate beneficiaries. Are we a forgotten endpoint? Well, I'm still learning. But if the sentiments and strategies I've heard expressed from this platform are carried through in the real world, then I think that we aren't a forgotten endpoint. Thank you.